Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be providing a longer term update on Ergo and going over some key levels to watch out for and potentially what to expect going into the next few months. So if you enjoy the content, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing. Now, if you haven't already seen my last video on Ergo a few weeks ago, I really encourage you to go check that out. I talked a lot about this support level around $1.68 and why I expected a strong bounce off of that. And ultimately we are up around 20% or so off that level. So it's a great sign, this big weekly candle coming up and basically removing the last three negative candles. So it's a great sign in the short term. And essentially what I'm looking at here is a pretty big range from this $1.68 support level as the low all the way up to the range high around $4. And then what we can also do is we can take the middle of the range as potentially the next target of resistance for us to watch out for. So the middle of the range is around $2.60 or so, and we have confluence with this being a strong region of support back in February of 2022. We had a pretty big bounce, really just going up from this level about 110%. So in the short term, if we're starting to make our way back up to this $2.60 region, I expect that to be our first major sign of resistance. Now, if we can start to reclaim that, then that's a great sign we might be starting to target this $4 range high and really start to develop some sort of bottoming and basing pattern. And I'm not necessarily calling for a low in place. I think it's way too early to call for that. But what I want to do is talk about what a low in place would look like. What we want to see on the chart to start convincing us that we actually have a low in place and we might be starting to reverse the longer term trend. Now, bottoming patterns take a very long time to develop. And essentially what we're going to be looking at here, whether the bottom is in today or it's in a few months, what a bottoming pattern looks like is a consolidation in a sideways move. So what that would look like, not exactly or specifically this has to happen, but just in general, going sideways, retesting the ranges, and starting to really develop this base that we could start to form support off of and build off of into the next cycle. And what I'm looking at again is a bottoming pattern, a base that is going to take a long time to develop, a consolidation pattern where we're starting to form these support levels and we're starting to round off. Now let's go over to Cardano and look at the prior bear market. And with Ergo, we really don't have a prior bear market we can look at. So I'm just looking at Cardano because the general structure of a bear market in a reversal is here. It's clear and we can see, in general, what does it look like when we're starting to build a base and form a new trend. And as we can see, we had the low in December of 2018. And then from there, we continued to go sideways and consolidate for the next 69 weeks. Okay, so we had the low in place in December of 2018, but you still could accumulate Cardano at the same level in 2020. So the point here is that you don't have to rush into Ergo if you're looking to develop a position. If you think the bottom is in, then it's still going to take a long time for this to actually reverse. Trends take a long time to shift from bearish to bullish because what you have to do is you have to shift from bearish to neutral in this sideways territory, and then you transition into bullish into an uptrend. And again, it took Cardano a very, very long time to actually start to, really trend back above this range and exit this accumulation zone into the next cycle. We had this zone of accumulation for about 89 weeks. You could accumulate at this region. At the range lows, you could have an accumulation at the mid-range. And essentially, it gave you so many opportunities. And what we did was we shifted from this big downtrend, this extremely bearish momentum, and then into this neutral territory. We consolidated, we went sideways, and then from there, after we left the consolidation phase, after we left the accumulation in the base, we started to form this rounding off pattern, and then we started to trend back up and ultimately take out some of these highs and form higher highs and higher lows. So again, I don't expect Ergo to be any different this cycle. I think that we have to give it a long time to really develop a base, a bottoming pattern, and whether low is in today or in a few months, you still have plenty of time to accumulate if you're looking for a longer term position. Now, I think we can really start to get excited on Ergo once it can reclaim the range high at $4. Once we can break above this level and then take out this lower high at $5.50, that to me is going to mean that we're starting to trend back up to new all-time highs. But until that happens, we're basically just consolidating in this range. Or we could be even breaking below this and then forming a range all the way down at this region. So for me personally, I'm really just looking at this as, we've got short-term resistance at the mid-range around $2.60. We've got short-term resistance at $4 at the range high, and then support at $1.68. And until we either break below this $1.68 support region and then flip it into resistance, or we break above the $4 resistance and flip it into support, until either of those happens, we can only expect consolidation and potentially just a sideways phase building some longer term base. And again, a longer term base is a great sign that we have a bottom in play, because what it does is it really starts to diminish this bearish momentum. It really starts to shift the trend, and that's what we want to see for a longer term position. But again, we could obviously not have a low in place, and we could exit this range to the downside and then form a low at this support region. So what that would look like as an illustration is if we're starting to come back down, really test on this low, potentially Bitcoin's dropping below 18K and dragging the alts down with it. What that would look like is a flip from support at this $1.68 region into resistance. And then from there, we could start to build out that base. We could start to consolidate, form this support region, and then from there, we could start to, reclaim the range and then ultimately trend back up into the next cycle. But either way, whether the bottom is in today or in 6 months or 8 months, it doesn't matter. What we want to see on the chart is a consolidation period, a sideways movement, a base of support being formed, and then a rounding off pattern with higher highs, higher lows, and essentially the same thing that we saw with Cardano back in the prior cycle. Now, it doesn't have to play out exactly like this. There's obviously several iterations that we could have of this exact pattern where, we could form a lower low, such as we did in March of 2020. We could form a higher low. We could do any number of scenarios. But the general point here is that we consolidate. We go sideways, we oscillate from the high to the low, and we form this longer term base, this longer term support for us to bounce off of. And you can see that's exactly what we did. We came down, retested this in November of 2020. We held support, we formed a higher high, and then we started to trend back up. So this is generally what I'm looking for Ergo, and something that you should watch out for. Again, it's going to take a long time to develop, even if the low is already in, which there is a possibility, but even if the low is already in, that doesn't mean we're going back to new all-time highs next month. It means that we have a long consolidation period ahead, that we have to build a base and start to form a new structure, transitioning from a bearish trend into a neutral sideways trend into the new uptrend of the bull cycle. So that's the end of my Ergo analysis. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any comments, suggestions, or feedback, please do leave those below. And as always, I will see you in the next one.